Hello again from the Midlands, except that we too are here in Manchester with the Conservatives just around the corner from the scenes of some of the worst of the summer riots, along of course with places like Birmingham, Wolverhampton and West Bromwich in our part of the country. At the time, the Prime Minister said that the offenders could expect to face the full force of the law, and the Stourbridge Conservative MP Margot James said that the courts should err on the side of severity. Well, with the number of arrests now coming up towards 700, how far is it the job of politicians to get involved? That's what I'll be asking the Environment Secretary and Meriden MP Caroline Spelman and Councillor Philip Atkins, the leader of Staffordshire County Council. But let's hear first of all from our reporter Bob Hockenhull. He was joined by Margot James on a visit to one of our local magistrates' courts.
The justice system is under pressure like never before after this summer's riots. Not just from the volume of defendants. In the West Midlands there have been 654 arrests, but also from the need to be seen to be tough on the rioters. On the evening of August the 8th, I was out here in the city centre reporting for Midlands Today. This area was teeming with gangs looking for shops to break into and loot. Within hours, the police were rounding up suspects for the courts to deal with. Under pressure to deliver speedy justice, magistrates sat through the night passing sentence, their efforts winning praise in the Deputy Prime Minister's speech at the Liberal Democrat conference in the city last month.
Here in Birmingham, the community stood together in the face of disorder and tragedy. Our emergency services, our police and our courts, they all rose to the challenge.
But have some magistrates and judges gone too far by imposing sentences that are too harsh? As the Royal Courts of Justice began hearing appeals from some of those convicted, the chairman of the Magistrates Association was in Birmingham.
I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that magistrates have been coming down particularly hard on any offences. The harm caused by a single case of theft or burglary might be minimal, £200–300 lost to the shopkeeper. But the harm caused by a single offence in concert at the same time as others committing the same offence can be quite significant.
There's still plenty of suspects to come before the courts. Fewer than a quarter of those arrested in the West Midlands have been sentenced for crimes that shocked us all.
Certainly in my lifetime, I don't think I've ever been as shocked and ashamed by anything, in this country.
Days after the riots, the Conservative MP for Stourbridge, Margot James, called on magistrates and judges to err on the side of severity when dealing with offenders. Do you still maintain your hardline stand?
Well, I don't think my stance was hardline. I was just saying that in scenes of such incredible aggressive violence, that the sentencing should err on the side of severity in the sentencing scale. I don't think that's hardline.
Birmingham Magistrates Court is expecting another influx of riot-related cases next week. The MP is keeping a keen eye on the outcome of hearings.
Why should people think that they can just threaten without regard to life or limb and go in as a mob and take what is not theirs? That is quite wrong and, in my view, should result in a custodial sentence.
This historic court in Stafford heard its first case in 1798. Justice was dispensed from here for nearly 2 centuries, until the last case on Thursday, July the 25th in 1991. 20 years after it closed, the legal system in the Midlands is facing unprecedented demands. 313 of those arrested after the riots in this region are still on bail, awaiting a decision over whether they'll be brought before the courts. The prison population is already reaching record highs. But many more arrests are expected, and the clamour for heavy sentences is not expected to diminish.
Bob Hockenhull reporting. Well, in a moment I'll be talking to our guests about some of the other big political themes of the autumn, but let's begin, of course, with the riots. Now, Caroline Spelman, in view of what many people see as the severity of the sentences that have been handed down, How comfortable are you with the involvement of politicians? Some people say it's no business of yours.
Well, I think people do want to see those offenders properly punished for the damage they've done to the communities where they live. But I think we need to respect the independence of the judiciary. It's very important. I would pay tribute to the magistrates who made a supreme effort to expedite these cases very quickly. Solihull magistrates sat 24 hours, round the clock. But I don't think it's for politicians to interfere with the working of the judiciary.
But Chris Sims, the West Midlands Chief Constable, said, yes, we've all heard about the tragic victims of crime, but he said there are some tragic offenders that he'd met down in the cells. I mean, it's very hard on someone who, one moment in their lives that they can regret for the rest of their days because they've got a serious criminal record.
Well, the fact that so many of the offenders are under the age of 18, and many of them, a majority of them, are repeat offenders, does tell all of us, including politicians, that we need to look at precisely how we deal with offenders and how we prevent reoffending. And that's a challenge to all of us in society, because many of those offenders were children, they have parents, they have families, they have extended families. I think it's for all of us, after the riots, to see what we can do to stop this happening again.
Philip Atkins, are you comfortable with the role that the politicians have played in all this?
Well, we police by consent in our country. We're not a police state, and we've got great communities across the West Midlands, particularly in my own county of Staffordshire. And to do that, policing by consent, people have to respect other people's property. And if they break the law, they should expect the full hand of the law to deal with them.
Some senior Tories, including Lord Heseltine, have compared the political leadership outside London, including by the colleagues of yours. You chair the leaders of the local authorities in the West Midlands, very unfavourably, says Lord Heseltine, with the leadership that London has got from Boris Johnson.
Well, I think the local leadership is strong in the West Midlands. We come together and we disagree and we agree. But I think we've certainly led on certain projects across the West Midlands, and local leaders are what the public elect. OK, let's move on to some of the other big themes of the autumn. High-speed rail, Caroline. We've spoken about this, and the last time we spoke there was a great consensus, we thought, but now a string of your party colleagues along the length of the line through Warwickshire and Staffordshire, local authorities as well, are coming out against it. That great consensus is crumbling, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a strong consensus between the main parties about the need for investment in our infrastructure, in an improved railway system. Of course, when it comes down to the detail, that often there are problems. But I think it's important to point out that a high-speed rail is needed to address capacity problems. There's no spare capacity on the West Coast Main Line, and that holds the whole of the West Midlands back. And it will bring £40 billion worth of benefit to our economy and 40,000 jobs. So these are important factors, though all the time, as a constituency MP, through whose constituency it goes, I am there to help my constituents mitigate the impact when it goes ahead.
And what do you say to that then, as the leader of one of the authorities who've come out against it?
Well, we had an unwhipped debate last March and we came out against it, but from Staffordshire's point of view, because we were looked solely at Staffordshire's the effect on Staffordshire of HS2. I think the keen things that we...
Can you see it in isolation? Are you not being a rather sort of parochial figure in this? There's a bigger issue at stake, as Caroline said, it's about capacity in the national interest.
There is certainly an issue about capacity on the West Coast Main Line and getting people around the country, but I think what we do have to do is three keen things. One is capture the maximum economic advantage for the West Midlands, and that's what for Staffordshire. Minimise the environmental damage that this will happen, and make sure that local residents' voices are heard, because it will affect some people quite dramatically.
We hear all the antis, all the voices. The shouting power is one expression I've heard for the opposition to it. Your side of the argument is being lost before our eyes, isn't it?
I think it's important the government had to remain neutral through the consultation process. But
ministers are for it. We all know that. Philip Hammond and his colleagues very strongly.
And most importantly, the Birmingham and Solihull Chambers of Commerce have come out and supported this, because they know that the capacity constraints on our rail network adversely affects business. And I know people are struggling to pay the petrol cost of running their cars to and from work. So the question for the government is, we've got to create more capacity, and a journey time of 31 minutes from London Euston to Birmingham International would of course have a very important impact for the West Midlands.
Now, moving on to your keynote speech, which is this afternoon, on the question of growth. We're hearing a lot about this debate within the Tory party as much as anywhere else about economic growth, but you have a particular message, we understand, for rural areas. So come on, we like exclusives on this programme. What are you going to be saying?
Well, very important. We want to support growth in the rural economy because, again, part of the reason we were more severely affected through recession was the imbalance in our economy. So not just a north-south divide, but a rural-urban divide. So in my department, we're working very hard to invest in rural areas. For example...
Does this mean a lot of new buildings going up? I mean, you've campaigned over the years for the Meriden Gap between Birmingham and Coventry, and now there are suspicions that your party is just going to open the floodgates on development.
The most important thing, Patrick, is to make sure rural areas are not disadvantaged by lack of access to the internet or no mobile phone use. So the government is making £530 million available for rural broadband, and also to change the use of existing buildings.
Philip Atkins, you of course are a farmer in your spare time. We all know the farmers are never happy, so what do you make of that?
Well, I think there's some great opportunities that are coming out. Super fast broadband is a really key thing to opening up the countryside to business that can work from home and barn conversions and the like. And there's an awful lot that the countryside can offer the economy. You know, the economy is our #1 priority at the county and for the government as well, because if the private sector grows and makes profit, those profits can be taxed and then provide the services that we all wish to see in our elderly and children, etc.
OK, you have the ear of the Environment Secretary. If there's one thing you'd want her to put into the speech, very briefly, what would it be?
Oh dear, off the cuff. Any opportunity to help grow the rural economy is very, very welcome.
Well, #1 priority is support British food and farming. We need to produce more food sustainably, Phil.
Yeah.
I must let you get away to put the final touches to your speech. Thank you both for being here at the Conservative Conference with us in Manchester. Thank you very much indeed. So, a summer